Ringo Starr, the beloved drummer of the Beatles, has recently opened up about the less harmonious side of the Fab Four. In candid interviews, Ringo sheds light on the internal conflicts and struggles that threatened to break the band apart. While the Beatles' music brought joy to millions, the reality of their relationships was far from idyllic. Ringo's accounts reveal how creative differences, personal egos, and relentless pressure from fame created rifts among the band members. From heated arguments in the studio to moments of profound disconnection, Ringo's stories uncover the challenges that came with being part of the world's most famous band. "I felt like a stranger in my own band," Ringo confesses, highlighting the isolation and frustration he often experienced. When Ringo Starr finally decided to speak out, it shocked many to learn about the internal struggles that nearly tore apart the legendary group. Let's rewind back to July 1940, when Ringo Starr, born Richard Starkey, came into the world in Liverpool, England. Life wasn't easy for young Richard. He was an only child, cherished by his mother, but largely abandoned by his father, who walked out when Richard was just 4. His mother took on multiple jobs, working as a cleaning woman and later as a barmaid, to keep them afloat. Richard's childhood was marred by serious health issues. At 6, he had an appendectomy that led to peritonitis, confining him to a children's hospital for a whole year. This setback put him behind in school, and just as he was catching up with the help of a tutor, tuberculosis struck. This time, he was sidelined for 2 years in a sanatorium. But there, amidst the long, dull days, something magical happened. The staff encouraged the kids to form a band to lift their spirits. Richard discovered percussion, making rhythms with a wooden mallet on the cabinets beside his bed. This was the spark that ignited his lifelong passion for drumming. In 1953, Richard's mother remarried. His new stepfather was a positive influence, nurturing Richard's burgeoning interest in music. When he finally returned home in 1955, school was no longer a realistic option. Instead, he took on various jobs, and one of them introduced him to skiffle music. Skiffle, a genre played with improvised instruments, fascinated Richard. By 1957, he was playing regularly with a skiffle band and got his first drum kit for Christmas. A few years later, Richard joined Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, a proper band with real instruments. He adopted the stage name Ringo Starr, inspired by his penchant for wearing rings and his love for country and Western music. His drum solos, dubbed Star Time, became a highlight. The Hurricanes gained popularity, and on a tour in Hamburg, Ringo met a fledgling band called the Beatles, comprising John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, Stu Sutcliffe, and Pete Best. In October 1960, Starr first played with Lennon, McCartney, and Harrison, marking the beginning of a legendary musical journey. In 1962, Ringo Starr officially joined the Beatles, taking over for Pete Best. The fans didn't take the change lightly. After their first performance at the Cavern Club in Liverpool, Best's supporters were so upset they even gave Ringo a black eye. But as time went on, fans began to warm up to Ringo, and he soon became a beloved part of the band. However, winning over the fans was just one hurdle. George Martin, the Beatles' producer at EMI, wasn't sold on Ringo's drumming skills right away. For their first singles, Martin brought in a session drummer and had Ringo play tambourine and maracas instead. Ringo was terrified he might get kicked out of the band before he'd really gotten started. Thankfully, it wasn't long before everything began to click. The Beatles found their rhythm together, and Ringo's spot in the group was cemented. Their big break came with the single Please Please Maine, which made the Beatles pop sensations in England. Their first album, Please Please Me, took the mania to a whole new level. Amid the whirlwind, Ringo got his moment to shine, singing lead vocals on the track Boys. In an interview chat with Dan Rather for AXS, Ringo Starr, now 83, got real about the ups and downs within the Beatles. He didn't shy away from revealing the secrets on how Paul McCartney, now 81, was the driving force behind their productivity. But it wasn't always sunshine and rainbows with the Fab Four. No, we didn't get along. We were 4 guys we had rows Ringo shared, reminiscing about their frequent squabbles. It never got in the way of the music, no matter how bad the row was. Once the count in, we all gave our best. And that was a little later too, which I think it was a natural thing, you know. Despite the clashes and drama, Ringo emphasized that their disagreements never interfered with their music. They always managed to put their differences aside and deliver their best performances. While John Lennon and Paul McCartney were celebrated for their songwriting genius, Ringo Starr's contributions often flew under the radar. Known primarily for his solid drumming, Ringo also played a crucial role in the band's creative process and was the glue that kept their spirits high and the atmosphere light. Unlike other bands where drummers stayed in the background, Ringo was very much a part of the Fab Four. He might not have penned as many hits, but he always had a spot on each album, singing one song and contributing his unique drumming style. This style became a hallmark of the Beatles' sound and inspired countless drummers who followed. In 1966, the Beatles decided to stop touring, wrapping up with a final concert at San Francisco's Candlestick Park in August. From then on, they focused on recording, pushing their music into new and experimental directions. They created the groundbreaking SGT, Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, in 1967, a concept album designed to be experienced from start to finish. In 1968, they released The Beatles, better known as the White Album, where Ringo shined with his song Don't Pass Me By. However, during the White Album sessions, tensions rose. Each member began to feel isolated, suspecting that the others were forming tighter bonds without him. Feeling increasingly sidelined, especially when Paul McCartney recorded Why Don't We Do It in the Road solo, Ringo decided to leave the band, making him the first member to do so. His departure was a wake-up call for the others. Realizing how essential he was, they sent him telegrams proclaiming him the best drummer in the world. When Ringo returned to the studio, he was greeted with a heartwarming surprise: his drum kit covered in roses spelling out "Welcome back, Ringo." Reflecting on McCartney's influence, Starr added, "Suddenly, we've got lives, and I've got children." The effort we put in was starting to pale a little, and we always thank Paul. To this day, he credited McCartney's workaholic nature for the band's success. Because of Paul, who was the workaholic of our band, we made a lot more records than John and I would have made. We liked to sit around a little more, and then Paul would call, "All right, lads," and we'd go in. Starr also expressed gratitude for the unique bond the band shared, which helped keep their egos in check. "I think it's all part of where we came from. I always give credit that there was 4 of us all from the same city, and we would look at each other. If one of us was freaking out or being a big shot, the other 3 would go, 'Excuse me,' and that kept us straight." The Beatles released 12 studio albums between 1963 and 1970, cementing their place as the highest-selling band of all time. Yet, their story was not without tragedy. John Lennon was tragically shot outside his noisy apartment on December 8, 1980, at age 40, and George Harrison succumbed to cancer on November 29, 2001, at age 58. His candid look into their relationships adds another layer to the complex dynamics that fueled the Beatles' music while also causing personal rifts. Ringo has shared some stories from his Beatles days, but you can't help but wonder if there's more drama we haven't heard about yet.